especially women, we often just do things out of obligation and because we feel we're needed and we don't know how to say no or how to, we're on the hamster wheel, but we don't know how to get off.
Yep.
I was starting to befriend a lot of other artists by then and pretty famous people in my world. And they were treating me like I was one of them. And I just realized like, oh, this is a construct that I've invented and a story that I've invented that is totally untrue. People love art or brands because they feel connected to them. They feel some
100%.
Emotional connection. And I have figured out, like, of all the things in my wheelhouse, what people connect with the most. What is something you now know that you didn't know a year ago? Or, something important that you've learned in the last year that's been profound for you?
Hi, everyone. Do me a quick favor and double check that you are a follower or subscriber wherever you listen to the show. I'd be deeply appreciative. It's the best way to ensure you never miss one of these conversations. Plus, it's the simplest and easiest way to help us keep all the moving parts of our show going. You all are on this journey with us, and I want to personally thank you. Welcome to another episode of the Conversations podcast. I am your host, Dr. Alison, and today I am so thrilled to welcome to the show Lisa Congdon. I am just so thrilled to have you on the show for like multiple reasons. And I'm very excited to even talk about how you became an internationally known and award-winning illustrator and writer. And you and I have a mutual person in common that I'm excited for us to kind of talk about as well. But before we get started, again, welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me, Alison. I am super excited to be here.
Well, this bottle right here should look very familiar to you. And this bottle I bought from a very good friend of both of ours, Karina Hamill, and she is a co-founder of Bivo. And we're going to talk about how your journey as an artist started getting on other consumer products. So we will definitely get into that for sure. But this bottle means a lot to me. And of course it matched beautifully with your glasses as well. So we're all color coded here.
We are. And awesome. I love how you have one of my favorite things about that brand is how you can change the lid and I don't know what the thing is at the top that you drink out of.
So we have the nozzle.
Yes, the nozzle. Yeah.
Yes.
And the cover. So you can have everything be one color. I actually have the purple one right with me today, which as you can see is entirely purple, but you can also switch out and change out the parts. And I love yours. It looks amazing.
Well, thank you. And this one, I was so happy because I met Lily at a bike race, and I was so drawn to all the bottles, but I was more drawn to yours. And and you'll have to excuse me because at the time I did not know you. I was not familiar with your work, and I was able to customize this bottle to actually make it exactly the way that it is. So it is a very one of the kind and very special for me. So,
yeah.
And I showed this to Karina as well. And I was just like, look how cool this bottle is. So, and then I took it a step further and not only stalked Karina just because I needed to, I just had to learn more about their company. And then of course I went ahead and had to stalk you because I was like, wow, this branding, this person, and thank you for welcoming my introduction for us to get to know one another so graciously because I was very excited to talk with you.
Well, it's really fun to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And especially coming from, part of one of the other reasons that you're also an athlete, and we're going to sort of get into that. And that was one of the reasons why I was very excited to talk to Karina as well. And so there's just this amazing community of athletes that are taking what they've learned sometimes in their own sport and then trying to translate it into some sort of amazing business that they can start out into the community. And that's why knowing you from a writer and an artist and how that all transitioned was just really cool and really interesting. So I'm looking forward to us kind of getting into that further. And as I talked to you before, I like to start each of my podcasts with a segment that I call the UNword Effect. And this is where and you had a really good time with this, and that was really awesome. And this is where I ask each of my guests to think of 3 words with the prefix of un that has some meaning to them in their personal life, in their professional journey, and even in their leadership evolution. And so I asked you to kind of think about what your process, and then also what poignant maybe moments these individual words had with you. So first I'd like to start, what was sort of your process besides, no one's ever asked me to think of 3 unwords before, but that sounds really interesting. And all right, let me entertain this.
Yeah. So I remember we've been talking for months, and at the time we scheduled this, it was sort of far out to the future. So
yes,
I remember I'm sort of very Gen X in that I like to print things out and put them in and file them away. Like, it helps me kind of like have this tangible record of something that I know I need to remember. So I printed out some of the guidelines you gave for, being on your podcast and thinking of unwords, and I printed them out. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, I looked at my calendar and I was like, I'm having a conversation with Alison next week. I need to dig into this assignment. And so I did, and I thought, oh gosh, there are so many words that start with un. Where do I begin? So I did a very practical approach, which was to go onto my computer, and I typed in the search all the words that start with un or something, and some website came up that had a list of all the words that started with un. Not all of which are unwords, but especially when you get to under. Anyway, and I just scanned them, and I made a list of, I don't know, maybe at the time 6 or 7 that resonated for me or felt like they were potentially part of my personality. And then I chose the 3 that I chose. So I went about it in a very practical way.
Now does that come from your also education background as well? Is that where some of your approach came from? Because I love how you said it was an assignment.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I do come from the world of education. Who knows how much of it is that, or my desire to be efficient with my time. I am also a Capricorn, so I think that I have a lot of very typical Capricorn traits. So who knows? But it ended up making the process really fun and enjoyable, because it did take me a while to get through the entire list of unwords that the internet showed me. I mean, there were pages. Maybe you would know, but like the average person might not know literally how many words. You can literally turn any word into an unword by adding unto it. Sure. I mean, not every word, but like many you would not think of. So that was super fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that, because when I first came up with this, I would say my 3 unwords that I had probably when I first started the podcast, and just through my own evolution, probably those three words would probably have changed
Mm-hmm.
for me. And so what's fun about it, one, it gets you to think about yourself in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the guests I've had on, some of their unwords sort of had a really negative impact on them. And then they've been able to sort of change that unword into something that has evolved into something really beautiful for them, either in their business or their personal life, or something they use that unword to describe a significant event that was preventing them from moving forward. And they talked about that process of, because they were able to kind of overcome that experience, is maybe how their personal life and their business life has sort of was able to move forward for them in various ways. So that's really great. No, thank you so much for sharing your process. And when you mentioned your words to me, that's kind of the fun part for me, because when I don't necessarily know the meaning or from what sort of experience is how you came up with those words, but I can look at them and go, wow, I can see why you chose the word, but I don't know really specifics of why. So that's what sort of makes this kind of the fun part, because it gives also me an opportunity to get to know you, and for our listeners and viewers to get to know you sort of on a different level through these words. The first one you came up with was unambiguous. Where, if you can talk about really kind of what that word means for you, and if there was something specific when you were sort of, we'll say, doing your homework, if there was anything that was really drawing you to go, yeah, this is definitely one of my unwords.
Yeah, this is one where I feel like I know this about myself mostly through my relationships with other people, because they don't necessarily tell me that I'm unambiguous. That one's a mouthful. But I've heard other versions of it, and I think that what most people in my life would say about me, definitely my employees, is that I know where I stand on most things. Like, I'm very decisive. I've spent a lot of time in my like later adult life, in the last, say, 10 years, exploring my values and my interests. And I work really hard to align my life decisions with those things. And so people kind of know what they get from me. I'm also not a mysterious person. You know, those people who are always dropping things online or on Instagram, or, you know, they say things and you're like, there's so much there, but like they're being really evasive about,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And I'm not one of those people. Like, if I'm sick, I will tell you what I have and what all my symptoms are. You know, if one of my employees comes to me and is like, I have this idea for something we should do, I will usually ponder it for a minute, but I don't waste a lot of time if I already have a gut feeling about whether or not it's something that resonates with me. And I'll say, you know what? I don't think so. Or I think that's an amazing idea.
Yes.
And so I make decisions pretty quickly. I'm really in touch with my gut and my values. And I ascribe to, I know Brene Brown talks about like clear is kind. Like,
Yes.
the more straightforward you are with people, the kinder you're being. And that's another way I think that it plays out. I try to be honest and say no when I mean no, and yes when I mean yes. I mean, believe me, it's been a life of work to get there. I haven't always been like that. So
yeah, no, as you were talking, it was making me sort of think about unambiguous is, to me, a really important leadership style, as well as it seems to be the way you communicate.
mm-hmm.
Because I've always been told that I'm an over communicator. And I think you gave me a compliment on that when I was sending you all the information. Because I want to make sure that things are really clear and comfortable for my guests. And so, I don't want something to feel really uh, kind of unclear for them. And so I think when you were talking, I think that's a testament to sort of your leadership style as well. Is that something you would agree with?
Yeah, definitely. I think my employees would agree with that too. I want very much to, like, I'm definitely a collaborator. I love having a team. I love, when people I work with come to me and say, there's a way I think we can do this better, or I really love this, but maybe have you thought about this? And I also love running my ideas by them. So I value collaboration. However, I think as a leader, you have to sometimes be efficient, make decisions quickly.
Sure.
And B, ultimately, I'm the one who's paying for things and has to suffer the consequences if, say, we release a product that doesn't sell, or
Sure.
that I'm maybe doing because somebody on my team thinks it's a good idea, but I deep down don't. Like, ultimately, the bottom line is with me. So I have to make some hard calls. And I do think that even though that's hard for my team, sometimes they appreciate it about me. Like, they know where they stand with me all of the time. And I also appreciate that about other people.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah, I do as well. I do as well. I would agree with you. Do you mind if I go back just a few steps? You just mentioned that this was not always something that was maybe easy or comfortable for you to be in this place on how your leadership or maybe communication is. Do you know, or could you share sort of what that transition, or was there a moment where was this just something you felt like you needed to practice, or was this something as you were really expanding, which we'll get into a bit later, just as your company was growing, did that sort of trait become stronger for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been somebody who has had a sort of deep connection to my intuition or my gut about things. Even since I can remember even recognizing that about myself when I was like 13. But I do think that I spent a lot of my life, and this is probably not uncommon for women my age, I'm 58. I did spend a lot of time, in people pleasing mode. So ignoring what I felt like I wanted. So I do think on some level, I've always sort of been in touch with that, but expressing it to other people or taking a stand, or being clear about what I want or didn't want, or what I thought or didn't think was is not something I've always had a skill for. And I do think maybe in the last 10 or 15 years, I've worked really hard. And, really my business has, I've been in business almost 20 years, but, the, the biggest growth has been in the last 15. And so I think really in the last decade and a half has been when I've recognized that I've had to do a better job of communicating what I wanted. And I think part of that was because there were a handful of times when I didn't. And then I was disappointed. And so I think you learn to sort of say what you need and want, and recognize, the power in that, when you make mistakes or missteps or you have regrets.
I'm really happy and very appreciative for you sharing that, because I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, there's so much you're dealing with as you're kind of building your business, and everyone has their inputs on who you're trying to surround yourself with, and sometimes we forget, and not saying that this is something that you do at all, but I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed that we're not able to articulate, go, no, this is really what I want to do. And sometimes you're the one that really has the best answer at the end of the day, especially in those early stages. And not being able to sort of speak up and go, no, this is the reason why I wanted to do this in the first.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still working on it, honestly.
Of course.
I had a, like, I think sometimes like I'm like this all the time, but I realize it's still a struggle. For example, last week, I've been working on this really big client project for about 4 months. It's been wonderful. The art director is this amazing guy. I can't say what it is yet because it's not public, but um, the project included multiple things. It's a big collection of things. And he came back to me with one of the last things that I had worked on. And he said, I really think this should be different. It doesn't feel as strong as everything else in the collection, and yada, yada. And I personally love it. And I actually think that not everything has to have the same level of intensity. And so normally when an art director comes to me and they say, I really want you to work on this thing a little bit more, here are my ideas, I'll usually acquiesce. But in this case, I actually found myself saying, no, I actually think this is exactly where it needs to be. And, I feel really strongly about this. And he was like, okay.
Yeah.
It made me remember that like sometimes you have to sit with something and think about it and really advocate for yourself. I mean, I wasn't necessarily opposed to doing more work, but I had already worked on it for quite some time and I felt really good about it. And there was part of me that wanted to be like, okay, what do you want me to do? Even though I had strong feelings. I mean, oftentimes when an art director comes to me and they say, I want you to work more on this, I'm like, you're right. This really is not as good as it could be. And that's an art director's job, to help an artist get the best work possible out of their brain. And so, yeah, it's like it's a muscle you have to work constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And especially in your kind of line of, where it's creativity, and then being able to take that creativity and what you have in your mind and then put it into, a product, for example. So that makes perfect sense. Well, I'm excited to also get into your second word call, and that is uncluttered. And we laugh because I know you and I unpacked a lot.
Yeah, my partner would disagree. Because compared to her, I'm quite cluttered. It's funny that I chose this word, and it's quite ironic because, and I think it's because of what I'm attempting in my life more than sort of what is like a descriptor of me. I have, I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple of years ago by my therapist, and it makes so much sense for me. My brain is definitely a monkey brain, and it's a lot of creative brains are, right? We're trying to juggle lots of ideas and thoughts. I am also a collector, so I have, like, even in my house, like, they're very organized, but I have collections of all different things also in my studio. And my wife would argue that, that creates its own form of clutter. I think she would much prefer a more minimalist existence. And I'm not super messy, but I'm not super clean. So I think, or I'm clean, but not super neat, I should say. Like if you look at my side of the bathroom compared to hers, I'm married to a Virgo. I mean, I may be a Capricorn, but I'm married to a Virgo, and like her organization and cleanliness is next level. So I think that I chose that word because for me, it's more about simplifying, getting my work and my life sort of whittled down to the parts that feel essential and meaningful. And I'm at a place in my life where I can do that because I have multiple forms of income. Like maybe I let go of some that I'm not as interested in anymore, or that aren't bringing me as much money or joy or whatever. And also, I've spent so much time in the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years, like really, this is going to sound funny, but like honing my friend group, or groups of friends. Like these are the people I want to be with, and I'm not going to waste my time with people that I don't connect with. So it's like everything from friendships to stuff, like having less things.
Yes.
Do I really need this? Do I need to buy this? Do I already? So I have this new rule that like I can't buy a new bottle of shampoo, even if one is advertised to me, until I finished the last bottle. I can't, like in the old me would have been like, well, it's on sale or what, I'm eventually going to need this, so I'll buy it now. So I'm working really hard on like keeping things really streamlined and simple and connected to joy and peace in my life. And I, with the goal of being uncluttered. I don't know that I'm quite there yet, but that's the goal.
That's another work in progress.
Yeah.
Do you think the uncluttered, because, I've talked to other leaders in their mid to late 50s. It seems to be a theme that you get to that point where kind of what you described. I mean, I went through that, some of those aspects in my life, with friends, and really what the word friend really means and what that really looks like, whatever my own definition of that is. And so simplifying that part of my personal life and also making time for myself within that space too. But then also in my business, because I felt like I was really being pulled in a million directions, and really sort of, as you talked about, what really are those components that are bringing me joy, and the ones that aren't, when could those really be phased out, or can those already be phased out? My question for you was that something that was more for you when you said you were diagnosed with ADHD, or was that sometime prior to that, where that thought, and of course this is in no way in in talking about any therapy, but more just, was that just sort of exposed, earlier on before that diagnosis?
Yeah, actually it happened right before the diagnosis. I went through this period. I actually wrote about it on Instagram a few years ago. It was called I called it loud quitting. And basically this was in 2022, I think. So like 3 years ago, and I had a really bad case of COVID that I've had COVID twice now, but the first time I had like a really horrible experience. And I would say a mild case of long COVID. So I continued to feel very fatigued and not well for a long time. And I'm normally a very high energy person. And so I had a lot of time during that period of like not really riding my bike very much and not feeling well to reflect on my overwhelm, my general overwhelm, which of course had nothing to do with COVID. It was more just, the life that I was leading, which was being on, 5 boards of directors and, saying yes to everything, every opportunity that came my way, and, having coffee with friends that I didn't really have a connection with, things like that. And I also quit drinking at the time. So I quit drinking. I quit a bunch of boards of directors. I quit all these things in my life that weren't serving me. and that I felt were sort of getting in the way of living more peacefully and more joyfully in my life. And it was a pretty profound moment. And I wrote about it. And it was like probably one of the posts I've written in the last, since I've been on Instagram, that went the most viral. Like it really resonated
Wow.
for people, because I think
Sure.
especially women, we often just do things out of obligation and because we feel we're needed, and we don't know
Yep.
how to say no, or how to, we're on the hamster wheel, but we don't know how to get off.
Yep.
And so that was sort of like phase one. And then since then, I've gone through other phases. I'm actually about to close a big part of my business, which I haven't announced yet. That's all I'm going to say. And that's like another phase of me being like, okay, like continually reflecting on like what's working, what's not working, what's bringing me joy, what's bringing me peace, what's getting in the way of that. And do I need to keep doing that thing, or can I let it go? So it's like an unending process, but it started for me about 3 years ago. And then it was about a year later that I got the diagnosis for ADHD, which also helped a lot of things make sense that didn't make sense to me
Yeah.
at the time.
Yes. Yes. I was really, I was, so honored that you shared that with me, because you and I talked prior to the podcast that, when I was diagnosed with a learning disability, it was during a time when you really didn't know much about it. A lot of the things were negative around it. It was like, oh my gosh, is she going to be able to go to college? And I mean, it felt like a death sentence actually, during that time of what level of success could someone really have with, having a learning disability at the time. And ADHD wasn't, necessarily something, was, really a diagnosis that was really talked about a lot. And then, it's been really exciting to see other really successful leaders come out, and talk about, you know, for you, for example, talking about your ADHD and what that means. And you said a lot of it makes sense to you. And once you really realize, like I've been able to, uh, over the years, change the story of where it has been a negative and has really shown me where it's kind of been, sort of my superpower in a way, in how I've been able to, look at my own life, be able to really look at things so, to the minutia sometimes for clients that they can't even see. And so I tried so much in my, earlier years in hiding it. And now I feel like it's a time where no, this has really benefited me personally, and it's, benefited me, um, professionally. And it has helped me be that, uncluttered as well, because I get very high anxiety around things when I feel like there's a lot of, when my mind gets too cluttered or my
Right.
environment gets too cluttered. So I can absolutely, relate to that. I Your third one was really interesting to me as well, and that was Uncharted.
Yeah. So this is another one where um this is more like a personality trait rather than, that I have done things that are uncharted in humankind, because I haven't. More that I am one of those people that once I decide I like or love or am into something, I kind of want to see how far I can take it or how good I can get at the thing. For example, when I started making art, I was well, in earnest, I was in my early 30s. And at the time, this was sort of when the internet was even kind of not what it is today. And I didn't have any idea that my love for art could turn into any kind of career or anything. So this was purely just like me loving something and being interested in something and doing something as a hobby. But once I got going, I was like, okay, I want to get better at this. And then I want to get better at this. And then I want to get better at this. And then sure enough, like the internet was becoming a space where people were sharing what they were making. I mean, we weren't quite at social media yet, but people had blogs, and the DIY movement was kind of happening. And I just sort of I had another job, but I got completely in my time outside of work, just very absorbed in this, this like art making thing. And also then just like, oh, Etsy became a thing, and maybe I could sell some things. And again, never imagining it could be my whole, that I could run a studio with 3 employees. Like that just never entered my mind. But, at every step of the way, I've like sort of just continued to grow. I used to have a sweatshirt that said ambitious. And I think it was like something that was, marketed towards women around, like owning the fact that you're ambitious, as opposed to it being a negative quality.
Yes, yes.
And then when I got in, I've been riding a bike since I was in my late 20s, but I really got into cycling in my early 50s, like during the pandemic. And it was the one thing that I could do safely with my friends that was fun and healthy and like not at risk of spreading, germs or whatever. And
Right.
and then I got really into gravel cycling during that time because it was having a moment. Well, it's still having a moment, but the moment was
Yeah.
starting. And I started racing gravel, and within a year and a half I had a coach who I still work with to this day. So it's like, how fast can I get? How strong can I get? Like, how high can I get my VO2 max? Like, all the things. And, here I am, like a middle-aged woman who'd never, I'd been an athlete my whole life. I used to be a competitive swimmer, but like, I really hadn't trained for anything since I quit competitive swimming, which was in my late 30s, early 40s. So it had been a while, like at least 10 years. And I just got really into
What
it.
was your main stroke?
Butterfly.
I was breaststroke.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was a competitive swimmer as well. Yeah. I love
Yes,
that.
we have so much in
Yes.
common. It's great.
I
So for me, it's like going to a place that I haven't been and pushing myself. So that, to me, that's what Uncharted means. It's um, like going to a place in my imagination about what's possible and thinking in terms of possibility versus like telling myself I can't do something. So,
Yes.
I'm, it usually is around stuff that I also place value on and also love. Going out and doing, structured bike training at age 58 is not for everybody. I get it. Like, it's so, but I love cycling so much and I want to keep doing it for as long as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm like really into being fit, and, so it has to be something that I love. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I don't feel like I have to be good at everything in my life. Like I'm actually really good, on the other hand, at like not being a perfectionist. And I think that's a quality that I learned from my mother. My mom's one of these people that like, she always will try things. And she's not one of these women who's like bogged down by self-doubt. If my mom thinks that she can make something, she'll try. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And like, she'll be like, look at this thing I made. And like, even sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, that's really ugly. But like, she loves it. And she
Yeah.
just like is into it, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Or maybe her idea of what's perfect is different than mine. But like, she really modeled for me and my sister this like just going and doing stuff and not doing it perfectly, but just doing it because you love it. And I
Yeah.
also am one of those people that like in most of my life, I'm okay with good enough. And I think that has saved me. And it also gives me more time for the stuff that I do want to be really good at. And make as perfect as possible.
I think that's a really great thing, because I just was about to say to you, that's a very uncommon thing for an athlete to say, because they would want to be. But I love the way that you said, and please correct me if I misheard you, but there's being able to do this and not have to be perfect, but then being able to save room for the things that you really want it to be perfect. That doesn't mean that you're slacking over here, but it's really managing your time. And I think that also releases some of that internal perfection that we put onto ourselves, where we're really hard on ourselves for. So I really love the way that you said that, where being able to just kind of have this spot over here, and then really saving your time and energy on really where that level needs to be elevated a bit for you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And being really intentional about that. And I think there are people who want to be excellent at everything and they burn out really fast. And I think one of the reasons I've gone through periods where I feel a little bit burned out, or
of course,
even really burned out, but like for the most part, I've been able to do a lot of things with my life. And I think that's because I'm really good at like half-assing some things.
As a leadership term.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I really thank you so much for saying that, because that even resonated with me, because I was sort of raised a bit differently, where perfection really mattered, and I don't know if it was perfection mixed in with a little OCD, possibly, and so. I think the way that you phrase that, I think, is just really a beautiful nugget for someone to really kind of internalize their life as well as their business. So I would love to transition. I as I said to you before during our prep meeting together, who you are in your business, I have never seen. There's branding, and then there's just really great, exceptional branding. And even if I did not have you on this podcast, I was telling you that it could be just something that you're putting together on Instagram to creating this bottle. If I didn't even know you and your name wasn't on it, and I saw it somewhere else, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that has to be one of her products. So I want to make sure we touch on that. And I don't know if that is sort of an evolution of how your background as an artist began. I'd like to sort of touch on how you got into this space, and you touched on it a little bit. And the two areas I want to make sure we cover too, as you're sort of talking about this, is I love when you were talking about the beginner gap, which I thought was a great thing to talk about, because I think that could mean a lot to other entrepreneurs or even founders on whatever stage they are in their business. And then I loved your messy middle, because I definitely could understand the messy middle of my own entrepreneurial world. But I definitely know you're with an education. So if you want to briefly kind of get us to when through the education, and then kind of how you were like, all right, I'm going to now do this as a business and see how this goes.
I started as an elementary school teacher. I went to school after college to get my teaching credential, and I did that for a while. And then the school I worked at a public school in San Francisco that got this huge grant. This was during the Clinton years, so there was a lot of money being poured into education. So we got a grant from this intermediary organization that had gotten money from the government. And the school where I worked needed, I guess it was sort of required that somebody I mean, the amount of money we got was, I worked at a big public school, elementary school, and they required somebody to sort of manage the reform effort at the school. And so I got hired to do that. And so I left the classroom and kind of coordinated this work that we were doing with this nonprofit organization from whom we had gotten the money, and all of the change efforts that we were embarking on, and collecting data around all of that stuff. And like, anytime you get a big grant, you got to report back to, talk about its effectiveness. And that was basically my job. So I did that for a couple of years. And then the organization that we got the money from basically poached me and hired me to come work for them. And so I ended up working there for almost a decade, and really loved it. And actually, it's while I was there that I started making art. I found elementary school teaching to be a very creative profession. Like, to make learning fun, you have to infuse art into math and like all the things. And I had this, incredible opportunity to be creative in my work when I was a teacher. And I think elementary school teachers in particular, some of the most creative people on the planet. And so when I left the classroom to go work in an office at this nonprofit, I was still going to schools and working in schools, but more as a consultant and less as, obviously not as a teacher anymore. And so I really was craving creative stuff in my life. And so I just started making stuff and drawing and painting and taking classes. And I also all of a sudden had all this time because I had a 9-to-5 job, and teaching is famously a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. job. It's more of a 12-hour job, sometimes even more.
Yes.
And so I was making more money and I had more time. And so I got really into art and craft and making stuff, which then led to, me sharing it on the internet, which I talked about earlier. And at some point, I'd gone to work for another nonprofit that some former coworkers had gone to. And so while I was there, I was like, you know what? I think I actually want to try to be a full-time artist. And I remember having dinner with my parents. And at the time I was I was in my 30s, late 30s. I was like almost 20 years ago. And my parents, at the time I was making a good money at this nonprofit. And I just remember them being like, what, and why would you, why would you give up health insurance and 401k and, this salary to what? Like, they were so confused.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I knew that I really wanted it. Because I remember being like, you just wait. And then it became sort of like the fire under my butt to actually be successful, because I was like, I can't disappoint my parents and I need to prove to them that I can do this. I think my dad to this day is still he doesn't believe it. Anyways, so I eventually went part-time at that job. It was a super supportive environment, and then eventually left to make art full-time. Super hard at first, not making any money, in debt, all the usual trope that you would imagine.
Yeah, of course. What sort of art were you creating at this point?
Well,
were
at the time
I was doing things similar. For example, was it similar style and aesthetics, for example?
No, actually,
or was it sort of different?
Super different.
Wow.
My color palette has always been pretty consistent. I'm always been influenced by folk art, things like that. But you can see a through line. I think at some point I want to do a Instagram reel or something that shows the evolution of my work, because I do think you wouldn't necessarily recognize it now because my style is so solidified. I wrote this book a few years ago called find your artistic voice. I just happen to have a copy on my desk. I did not plan this, but it's really about like finding your voice as an artist, and it was based on my own journey and what I learned, and then I did a lot of research and talked to a lot of other artists. But at the beginning, you're trying to figure out who you are, what you want to be, like who am I as an artist, what am I trying to say, all of that. And
Lisa, were you concerned at any point at this early stage that did this ever enter into your mind of, because when you tell people you want to be an artist or something, whatever, an artist in whatever that capacity is the first thing that people think about is a starving artist. What was that ever in your mind, or were you pretty confident that not only you felt that your art could sell in some capacity, but you just weren't quite sure maybe what that path was going to look like yet?
Yeah, the latter. And that I think I had I don't necessarily think it was confidence, because I was still figuring out who I was and building my skill and developing my style and my voice. And that takes years for anybody. But
Sure.
I think it was like less confidence and more determination, or just sort of like that gut feeling that I had that I could do this. And so I had told you previously this beginner gap story, and I think this is a really good time to talk about it. So Ira Glass of This American Life has this great segment. You can Google it and listen to it, but I'll summarize it for you. So it's basically about the beginner gap. And he's talking specifically about, I think, creative people who make music or art or write or whatever. And when you start out on any creative endeavor, and I think this could apply to things that aren't creative too, you have a vision of, you have taste. So you have like, oh, I want to make this kind of art, or I want my art to look like this, or I want my music to sound like this. But there's a skill gap, right? So you're just starting out. There's no way you could execute the thing that you're familiar with because other people do it, and you have a vision for what it could look like. And so when you start the process of doing that thing, making art, making music, what happens is people get so frustrated because they can't do it the way that they envision it. There's a gap, literally a gap between their skill level and their taste level, or what they want, where they want to get. And so most people quit because it's so uncomfortable to make crappy art or crappy music or a crappy piece of writing. And the only way to get to the other side, and I use the analogy of like a shark tank, you can't like get through to the other side without being in this sort of messy middle. So, or going through like a maze or a labyrinth of some kind. And you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable and being in that really messy space before you can actually, you held up the water bottle, like that the designs on that water bottle are very emblematic of like my current voice and style. And it's been, I've made work that looks like that for, many years. And I have a very well-defined voice and brand, because my style is very consistent, which when you're an illustrator like me is important, because, people hire you to make things and they want you to make it in your style. And if you were all over the place, it would make no sense. So, I like I'm a somebody who, and I think I alluded to this earlier, like I really learned to just be uncomfortable with things not being perfect, and really learned to embrace the messy parts of the process, when you're learning to do something. And I also coincidentally think that's part of why I'm become a decent athlete at an older age, is that I'm willing to do the work required to actually get to that thing. And so that's a lot of what I talk about in this book, Find Your Artistic Voice, is like that the journey is not straight. It's like winding and messy, and it takes a while and a lot of exploration and trust and, letting go of your ego and all of that stuff.
And I think that, yeah, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I did all, and I like somehow managed to do all of that. And I think another reason that I was able to do that is because I was older and I had a lot of like emotional maturity, like because I didn't actually figure out that I wanted to be an artist until I was in my late 30s. I was like, oh, I know because of all the jobs I've had and life experience that like this is going to be hard. I was under no illusions that I could just like walk into this space. And quite frankly, for a while, I had imposter syndrome. But I also knew that if I worked hard enough and like practiced and continued and learned from my mistakes, I would eventually get there. Like I just trusted in that. And I think that was helped by the fact that I had some life experience that and other experiences where that worked, where working hard and like showing up and, going through the uncomfortable process, like it got me somewhere. So, and from there, I like basically built a business that has grown a lot in the last, I would say 10 years in particular.
Let me ask you this. I was going to ask you a question, but now I have to go back because you mentioned this word. But I'll come back to it. When you just mentioned imposter syndrome, what does that word or that phrase really mean to you? Because I've had other leaders mention it, and I think it's important to because it's one thing is the imposter syndrome, for some leaders I've talked to where they have moved from a very comfortable place to a very uncomfortable place. And now they're trying to go out into this world where they know it could be great, but there's some insecurities around it for them. What does that really mean to you when you say you felt that you had imposter syndrome?
Yeah, for me specifically, it was really about like being in the art world.
Did you feel like you didn't belong there?
Yeah, okay. For sure. So, I think the art world in particular, and I think there are other segments of society that also fit about what I'm about to say, which is that it's kind of mysterious. People think that like, it's reserved for, special people who are uber talented and genius, or that, people who went to art school or have certain credentials. And these were all things that I think that's changed a lot because of the internet. And basically you can go to the art school on the internet now and also like not go to art school or not have any particular cachet, and still make it as an artist based purely on your talent. But, at the time I started, that wasn't necessarily the case yet. And so I had all these ideas in my head about what it meant to be an artist and what qualifications you needed to get there. In fact, there's like an illustration in the book that I just showed you that is like an ID card for an artist, like, like you're officially a member of the club or something. Yeah. But that doesn't really exist. It's just. So
you were feeling like that people were going to think you skipped.
Right. Or that I didn't belong, that I didn't deserve to be there. It was really about deserving. Yeah, and absolutely. I don't feel that way at all anymore. And I do think that I had some moments where I realized that like I didn't need to worry about it and that was bullshit. But there were many years where I felt like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. People are talking about me behind my back saying that I don't deserve to be here. None of that was true, but like no one's really ever talking about you in the way that you think they are.
I think we all learned that while we were in therapy. That wasn't the case. But I want to touch on because I think this is such an important topic, and I'm really happy that you brought it up and explained it in the way that you did. Was there a particular moment, because sometimes we can get stuck in that space, in that imposter syndrome space, the way that you just described it? Was there a moment in your career when you did say, yeah, that is bullshit? Like what, and how did that record, if you will, in your mind stop playing for you maybe as loudly, and you were able to sort of now push that aside?
I mean, I think it was a combination of things. It really kind of was messing with me for a while there. Like I had reached a point in my career where I was getting a lot of press and things were happening, but I was still feeling really insecure about my place in the world of art and illustration. And at the time I was working with this meditation teacher, and we would meditate together, and then we would talk about stuff that was on my mind. And I was having a lot of anxiety that was like about this thing, this like fear of not belonging or whatever, or that, I somehow didn't deserve it, or that I was going to be exposed as a fraud. And we really unpacked it. And I think I wasn't in therapy at the time, but I was like working with this meditation teacher, and like we really just started to unpack it. And I think just talking about it openly made me realize, because it was like my dark secret that I felt this way. And I started writing about it on my blog at the time. And I think it helped me to just name it. And then after that, I think there was like another year where I just started to really like own the stuff that was happening for me, and like really just accept the love of the people who followed my work. And I was starting to befriend a lot of other artists by then, and pretty famous people in my world. And they were treating me like I was one of them. And I just realized like, oh, this is a construct that I've invented, and a story that I've invented that is totally untrue. And I deserve to be here just as much as anybody else. And everybody is being so wonderful to me. Like, why not just let that love in, and like, just wake up every day and say like, I get to make art for a living. This is amazing. And it just sort of dissipated. And I mean, there were probably a few moments where, I gave the commencement address at Minneapolis College of Art and Design in I can't remember what year it was, but this was around that time. And I never went to art school, and here I am wearing a cap and gown and and walking in with the president of the college and all the professors, and like I'd never even gone to art school. And that was a moment for me of like imposter syndrome, because like all these people, I remember after I gave my commencement address, were like, where did you go to art school? And I was like, I didn't. And, it was so awkward and uncomfortable and weird, but also like so amazing. Like there I was, and I had like to really reckon with that. And I think that was kind of a turning point for me, where I was like, I'm going to change the story for myself. And eventually I let go of it. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I think a lot of leaders go through that. And I think it's so important to talk about that, because especially when you are wanting to start your own business, or, there's been people who have held, I had a beautiful person on the podcast, and she finally got to that corner office that she was wanting to do, and left it. She's like, what the hell am I doing? And ended up starting a beautiful nonprofit with her cousin. And everyone was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you finally got to that pinnacle, like what's going on? And so, here she was, and then thinking to herself like, oh my God, what am I doing? I haven't done a nonprofit before. And here we are in our head creating these, stories, and they are just out there just doing amazing work, like yourself. So thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely want to save some time for us. As I mentioned, your branding is incredible. And it embodies you. And then you take that branding and it's just whatever you touch, you know it's yours. And
Mm.
you think about other businesses where everyone talks about branding. You got to talk about your branding and how, if there is a one, I'd like to know how you got to the point, and I'm sure that was a very long journey to get there and to hone it down to the way that you have it. But I find this part, besides trying to figure out a company name, and you got off easy with using your name, so you're
Yeah.
you're good. But other people, that's part of the process, right? They're trying to come up with their company name, they're thinking about their product, but then it's it's the logo and the colors and the branding and all that. And your just it just tells such a beautiful story, and it's from not only your products, but it's also, you are not just I mean, you have your art on big consumer products as well, which congratulations, because that is just like very, very cool, and a huge testament to you. And I'm very excited in any way we can promote all this fun stuff that's going to be being released. But if there's sort of one, I'd like to for you to talk about your branding, and sort of how they came up with in the best way you can. And then I'd like to see what sort of advice, because it can really be an overwhelming process for someone who is trying to start a business.
Yeah, so I think it was an evolution over time. And like, it's funny that you use the word branding. I would call it my artistic voice, but it is both for sure. Um,
And that's what, thank you for clarifying that, because I had that in my head. You're absolutely right. And I think for me, I looked at it in the same way as artistic when I was developing. And in fact, I had a young artist create my logo. And so I agree with you. I look at it too as art, but in a conservative business, we use it as branding.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I I like I love a good Venn diagram, and I often describe my approach to my branding or my voice or like what I choose to put out into the world as like,
Mhm.
I mean, there is the sort of like, one circle could be like my visual vocabulary. So all of the things that make up my work, that sort of tie it together, like the color palettes that I use and the symbols and the way that I draw things. Like there's so many repeating elements in my work, which is part of what makes it recognizable. I don't draw
Mhm.
something once and then never draw it again. I
Yeah.
use the same things over and over and over. And people think that's cheating, but it's actually how you build a
Oh,
brand.
yeah,
Um,
I think it's extremely smart.
so like visual stuff, like what you see. And then another circle in my Venn diagram is like my values. And
Mhm.
um those come through in like how what I say. So my work has a lot of hand lettering and messages in it. And so I care deeply about certain issues. And I also talk a lot about my own mental health and
Mhm.
also just how to show up in the world as an artist. So, my voice also includes like my values and the thing, the subject matter, like what I'm making work about. Um, and then I think a lot about what, and I think when you have an art practice that's commercial or
Mhm.
any, creative business that's commercial, you have to think about what's going to resonate for other people in your audience. Like a lot of times I try things or concepts or whatever, and I put them out and they don't resonate. So I think one of the wonderful things about social media for me has been like data collection. Like
Mhm.
what's resonating for people? And I've had an online retail business for years, and it's also how I get a lot of these brand collaborations from people seeing my work out in the world and seeing my work on social media. And I'm also thinking about like what lights people up? Like what are people of my work? What do people enjoy looking at? That doesn't drive everything I make, but as a commercial artist, it's something I need to think about. You always need to be thinking about your audience and what's going to resonate for them.
Sure.
And because people love art or brands because they feel connected to them, they feel some
100%.
emotional connection. And I have figured out, like, of all the things in my wheelhouse, what people connect with the most. And so I tend to focus on those things, at least in my commercial work. Now, I also show my work I paint and I make collage and I show my work in galleries. And that tends to be more stuff that I want to make that may or may not sell. There are definitely parts of my art practice where I'm not thinking about, does somebody need to like how this looks or what it says? But I also do think about that quite a bit. And I think to have a successful branding, you have to be thinking about that.
And I think that's what gets lost again when someone's thinking about, there is one thing, we're so focused. I spoke to another leader about this, we're so focused on what's out there and trying to compete with other people than really spending the time of doing that inner work of what it is you really want to get out into the world, and do that first, and then figure out how that is necessarily going to be. Because I think you bring up a really great point. We don't stop to think about what our own values are, and it's all about connecting. And when the people can connect with you as the business and the person behind the business, that's brilliant. Because I don't even need to know your name is on something. I just know that's Lisa's. Like I know right off the bat.
Or oftentimes it's not mine, but people think it is because somebody's copying me or whatever. Or they're influenced by me.
I was trying to be polite about that.
Yeah.
But I will say you also do this really beautifully, because we're also connect on the Instagram, and you can take something very controversial and put your beautiful art behind it with the writing of a message that you want to get out there. And it's just so beautifully done. It's just really beautifully done. I just have to compliment you on that. But we are getting close to time. I wanted to ask you if there was anything that you feel that we have left out from our conversation that you want to make sure that you wanted to mention, and then we'll move into the next segment of Ask Dr. Alison.
No, I feel like we've covered so much. This has been such a rich conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, then let's turn the tables a bit then. And what is your question for me?
Well, this is a question that I love to think about and also ask. So I'm a little background. I do think that a lot of young women in particular are sort of obsessed with youth and thinking about all of the things that they need to do before they're 40, for example. And I feel like my life has gotten so much richer since I turned 40. And as I've gotten older, and as somebody who's also in midlife, I'm curious. I love this idea that we're always learning things, and we're always learning new things all of the time. And sometimes they're very profound. And I was just curious, what is something you now know that you didn't know a year ago, or something important that you've learned in the last year that's been profound for you?
I will say this podcast has been really profound for me. So I've shared this before in other podcasts. So I rebranded. I had a strategic planning consulting company, and then when COVID hit, everything stopped. And so I was on my bike that you and I have in common, and we, just like you, it was the safest place and where you could hang out with people and be at a distance and still feel connected. And I said to myself, if I was to, if everything opened up, would I still be, doing this type of work? And the answer was yes, but in how I was doing it, the answer was no. It wasn't fulfilling me as much. And so that's when I went through my own kind of rebranding, doing a lot of soul searching, as kind of you were talking about earlier. And I worked with my own therapist and executive coach, and realizing some of the work that I was doing that I did enjoy, but I was doing it to fill a need for other people than maybe it was for myself. And that's when I talking about imposter syndrome. When I was thinking to myself, like, okay, great, I'm going to get into this podcasting space. Who's going to come on my show? And what are we going to talk about? And what's going to make it interesting? And so I kind of went through that as well. And then realizing through my early adopters and then other people saying, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. And then all of a sudden, I have men on as well, and I have athletes and CEOs. I have people globally that come on the show, and I didn't realize that there was this gap, if you will, that people wanted to talk about the messy middle. They want to talk about their career. They want to talk about mental health issues that they went through. They wanted to find a safe platform and someone that would respect their stories to where we can share and create this community. And so I think what I learned about myself is that I can play in this space, in this podcasting space, which was a weird thing to say and hear. And then hearing people say, you're really doing great work. And I didn't know this was the work, because the work, I just really enjoy this and having these level of conversations, because I think it can help so many other people and leaders and do great things. And they don't have to view themselves as being a starving artist. They can be super successful just like yourself. And so I knew I was good at the work that I do from a business standpoint and getting people out of their own way with that type of work. But I didn't know that I could build a platform and a movement to what it is that I've been able to do over the past year and a half.
Amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
It's never too late.
Thank you. No, it's never too late. And I think that's what I've noticed with other, you mentioned from 40, yes. And then there's just something about 50. So whoever's
100%.
listening, there's something about 50 that is just really freaking cool. And it's hard to explain because 50 to other people, and I probably was one of those people like, oh my God, when I get to 50, that is old. And I didn't realize that 50 is really an empowering time. And so I'm happy that I have embraced it as positively as I have.
That's great. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this wraps up another episode of the Unconversations podcast. A huge thank you to Lisa Congdon. Thank you again so much for being on the show. I absolutely appreciate your time.
Thank you. This was a really fun, and I am, when you first reached out to me, I was like, wow, this isn't just any conversation. Like, I need to think about this. And I am so glad that I did, because it's actually one of the richer podcast conversations that I've had in a long time. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.